guys, so there are a few reviews and academic kinds of discussions that I've been wanting to make lately, but I just haven't done all of the prep work necessary to make those videos. So in the meantime, I thought I would do a more casual kind of discussion topic and talk about what my reading was like at university. Because my reading before university was very different than my reading during university, and then my reading after obviously has become quite different as well, and then even throughout that year of university, it changed quite drastically. So in my fall semester, which was the first semester, I ended up reading 7 books in total, 5 of which were for school and 2 of which were for my own enjoyment. In the second semester, I ended up reading 17 books total, 7 of which were for school and 10 of which were for my own enjoyment. So in addition to the things that I could tangibly count as a book for school or for pleasure, obviously I was reading a lot of other things as well. I'm in the humanities, so a lot of what I do at school is read all day. So obviously, in addition to those books, there were things like articles read for research or just for classes, various excerpts of text that might not be a whole text, so I wouldn't necessarily count it as, a book read, textbooks, things like that. So obviously I was doing a lot of reading, so it's not like I feel like the act of reading, slowed down for me at university. No, it went up. All I ever did was read. The reasons for why I started reading less in university I think are kind of obvious. So obviously, you're in school, you have a life change, you become busy with other things like socializing start to take up more time. As well, at the end of the day, if you've been reading all day for school, one of the last things you want to do is crack open yet another book, sit right back down and do the same activity you've been doing all day. You start to want to sort of do things that are more physical or just a change from what you're doing all day. The fact that my hobby is intertwined with my major, what I'm doing at school, is something that is probably more specific to humanities types, because obviously if you're in science, yeah, you're reading and writing a lot, but the things you're reading and writing are more distinctly different than, for me for instance, or if I read history for school, do I really want to sit down and then read a book about history again? Not really. So that I think was obviously a huge and kind of obvious factor, is that if you're doing something all day, you do want a break when you come home at the end of the night. So in the first semester, I had 2 books for pleasure and 4 months of school, which is obviously, if you've seen any of my past videos or if you ever looked at my Goodreads, that was a huge decrease in reading, to read 2 books in 4 months for me. And I'm just not really counting school stuff, because reading a school book to me was the equivalent of just sitting down and reading a textbook. The act of reading for school was so different than reading for pleasure. So my reading slowed down drastically. I basically stopped reading. And then in the break between first semester and second semester, I read a few books, which was good. It kind of reminded me that yes, I can still read for fun. Yes, I do still like this activity. Yes, it's still possible for me to do it. And then the second semester, something changed in that, again, I wasn't reading as much as I would read now or as much as I read before, but my reading speed did go up considerably. And, in remembering first semester versus second semester, I clearly remember a number of occasions second semester where I sat down to read or I carved out chunks of time. And I remember reading in that time frame in the way I don't really remember the first semester, because I just didn't. I was just doing school and socializing and coping with this life change. The way I was reading didn't change much in second semester, in the sense that some people who are quite busy talk about how, they read a lot of audiobooks, so in between activities they sort of get that reading in. Or other people might say, I just switched to ebooks, so it was just so much more convenient to carry, and that made me up my reading. I didn't really do any of those things. I did listen to 1 book on audiobook over the course of several months, very slowly. So the actual physical, tangible way of reading didn't change much, but what did change is how much I started to carve out time for reading, in the sense that before in first semester, I thought of it as something that I should be doing on a daily basis, so if I didn't do it, I felt bad, and I was like, oh no, I should read at least, a few minutes a day. But that's just not how I read. I'm not the kind of person who can sit down and read for 10 minutes a day, because I need time to become engaged in the act of reading. If I don't have an hour or a few hours to read, and if I don't have that sense of I have all the time in the world, I can sit down and I can devote my time to this book, then I just can't quite engage the text properly, and I find that my reading experience, if it's scattered, is always much less meaningful. And what I think is the most distinct change in my reading from first to second semester was I started to carve out actual chunks of time in which I would read. And for me, I think it was more dramatic than it would be for a lot of people, because I think some people would be content with just saying, I'm going to give myself an hour in the middle of the day and I'm going to read in this time. For me, if I could possibly be doing school within a time frame, then I would feel guilty for reading, and I'm not able to focus on it properly, and I would just rather be doing school, or I'd rather just be finishing up the tasks that I need to do. So what I did was I would say something like, okay, once a week or every few days, I'm going to carve out this hour at this time at the end of the night where I'm just going to read. I remember a few occasions where I worked really hard to get all of my work done, and I just had the 5-hour chunk of time in the evening where I was like, okay, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna binge read this one book, and that's it. I know a lot of people are better at balancing books with other activities and sort of continuously reading even while they're very, very busy. And I think it's something I want to strive toward, in the sense that I am happier if I'm reading. I would love to be reading at least, let's say, 50 minutes to half an hour a day, even when I'm at my busiest. But at least this year, it just wasn't something I was capable of doing. One thing that really developed for me this year was a really distinct understanding of just how much I need reading. And not just like the physical act of reading, because I could be reading articles and textbooks all day for school, and I wouldn't feel that feeling that I get from reading. And so what I realized was that I need to read for pleasure. Just almost to feel sane and to feel normal. Like, I need to have a certain amount of time where I'm reading. People who like to read are very big on talking about how important it is and how great it is, but it always sounds very vague, because it's just not something you can really verbalize, because I think for a lot of people, love for reading or the need to read is something so intrinsic that it's almost like saying, like, yes, blood needs to pump through my body. It's important because my body needs to function. Like, you're just kind of like sitting there like, I don't know. But recently I've been trying to really isolate why it's important for me to read, because I think that if I know why it's important, then I will be more motivated to actually carve out those parts of my life for it. And it's something that I find, on one hand, it soothes me. It calms me down. I'm someone who gets very stressed out very easily. And so sitting down and just thinking about something else and just immersing in a book and having it just be not even escapism necessarily, but just losing your sense of self and just completely immersing in something else. And that's something that you can get from school or from, just any activity, but I find that it's much easier to do if you're reading for pleasure and if you're just focusing. Like, you don't need to think about, oh, I need to take notes on this or I need to do this. You're just in it. Reading just kind of soothes my mind, in the sense that I find that it helps me think in different ways, and it kind of makes me feel like my mind is more malleable. But yeah, overall, I think, if I had to really summarize my experience with reading over the last year, it's that I didn't do it for a while because I felt like I had other priorities, and then when I didn't do it for a while, I felt so off that when I did start again, I was like, oh, this is really important. And it's something that I think, before I wasn't really aware of, because before I was never really truly busy. But this was the first time where I actually had a lot of things to do, and I still have a lot of things to do, and where reading is actually hard now, because you have to actually carve out that time, as opposed to in high school, when for me, I didn't really have much going on. Like, I had a lot of free time, I had very little schoolwork, and I just read whenever I wanted to. So yeah, that was kind of a summary of what my experiences were like reading over the last year. This is something that I really want you guys to comment on, because obviously my circumstances where I'm in school and, my time is spent doing that, and my experience as that of a student is very different to people who are out in the workforce already, or still in high school, but are maybe busier than I was before, or, whatever it may be. So I really want to ask you guys, how do you actually physically read? Like, when do you carve out that time? How often do you do it? Is it something that for you is a daily activity, or are you so busy that maybe you only have a few hours a week that you can read, and that's when you binge? And so I'm very curious to know, if you guys want to comment down below, I'd really be fascinated to hear about, when do you carve out that time to read? What is it like? For me now in the summer, I'm working and I'm socializing and I have a few little things going on, but I do have a lot more time. So I found that obviously I can read more throughout the day, but I still prefer to sort of have those few hours, preferably in the evening, where nothing else is going on and I'm just reading. And that's something that I've basically only developed over the last year, which I think is kind of interesting. But yeah, so comment down below if you have anything to add. I would love to hear what your reading is like.